Changes come apace. Despite Ken's arrival, I'm sure that I did not want to leave my home. I didn't know why we had to go, and I'm also sure that my parents were more than relieved when they were finally allocated a council house. This was number 1 Whiteley Crescent, on a brand new housing estate at Far Bletchley, between Bletchley and Newton Longville, a lot closer to where Dad worked too. It was a 3-bedroom, semi-detached house on the corner entering the Crescent. Mum was thrilled with it. Her first home and a brand new house. One unusual feature that she really liked was that the living room fireplace was in the middle of the house, against the dining room wall, so no heat was wasted. The only problem, like our later house in Stewartby, was that the window frames are of painted iron and collected condensation in the winter, but that wasn't enough to worry Mum. In all our houses, with no double glazing, and doors not fitting that tightly, the drafts whipped through in the winter, so 2 big brass hooks were fitted at the top on the inside of each exterior door, and the living room door. In the winter a pole was placed across these, from which hung a heavy curtain. A sausage or snake, a draught excluder made from a stuffed tube of material, was also laid at the base of the door. With being on the corner, our garden was triangular in shape, the base toward the house. It was still big enough for Dad to grow some vegetables in, as well as having his allotment. All the fences were made of open wooden railings, so you could see and talk to any neighbour close enough. The fronts were open and grassed. We moved in around Easter 1948, when I was 3.5 years old, so that was the next big event for me. Furnishing the house can't have been easy. Not only did Mum and Dad not have much money, but it still wasn't easy to get new furniture, which was still mainly also utility furniture. They even needed coupons for the lino floor covering. We had 2 big utility armchairs in the living room, which lasted for many years. They were square with wide arms, covered in a dark green fake leather, with similar coloured fabric seats. The dining room suite, which again lasted many years, was also utility furniture, though not their nicer bedroom suite. This was 1 large and 1 small wardrobe and a dressing table, which they had right up until moving into their care home last year. Most of the rest of the furniture was given to them or bought second-hand. There was no fitted kitchen. The main furniture item in most kitchens was a freestanding kitchen cabinet, some 6 feet or so high. The top part was a storage cupboard with a shelf. Below this, a drop front door, which served as a work surface, covered another storage area, and under this again were drawers and a bottom cupboard with a shelf. Bedroom curtains were lined with blackout material. Everyone used this during the war for all their curtains. A nationwide blackout was declared very early on in the war to help prevent enemy aircraft from accurately pinpointing targets. Don't forget there wasn't even radar at that time, let alone GPS for navigation. I really liked the blackout curtains. For many years I slept much better if my room was very dark. When I was 2 years old, Mum and Dad took me to the Isle of Wight for a holiday. We stayed for a week in a boarding house, see early holidays when we get to it, with a landlord who was rather unpleasant, but in those days you didn't argue. This landlord took our ration books, as was normal, so that he could feed us for the week. But apparently the evening meal was always just a basic salad with a bit of meat, cheese or fish. There was never a cooked meal, and Dad has never liked salad. The other thing the landlord insisted on was that I should be in bed before the evening meal, so by 6:30 every evening that was the day over for me. However, after our move to Far Bletchley, in the summer of 1948 we had a really lovely week's holiday in Great Yarmouth. Mum was by now pregnant again, so that was the last proper family holiday Mum and Dad could afford for another 10 years, until I was 13 years old. We did go to stay with relatives in the years between. I was lucky in that I also, as I shall relate later, went on holidays with Auntie, Uncle and Ken. 2 more big changes, additions to the household, soon followed. My sister Carol was born in February 1949. Poor Mum. Carol was born a day late too. Not for Mum's anniversary this time, but for her birthday. Carol was born 20th February. That was a snowy Sunday. Auntie and Ken had come to us for a birthday tea for Mum on the Saturday. Mum had made a sponge cake that morning for tea, even though she was not feeling quite right. She was an excellent sponge cake maker, but says that this one was as flat as a fart. Mum didn't tell Auntie how she was feeling, even though she couldn't eat much tea. She had a terrible backache too. Carol was born at home in the early hours of the Sunday morning. When I woke up, Dad brought Carol into my bedroom to show me our new baby. I knew that Dr. Lufkin came and thought that she had brought the baby in her bag. Auntie told Mum off later, saying that she would have taken me back to Cambridge Street with them to stay if she had known how Mum was feeling. Then I would have been out of the way of all that was going on. The baby's name was at my insistence, Carol, after my friend next door in Cambridge Street. I suppose I wanted her to be a friend like that to play with, but of course she was just a little baby, so rather disappointing to me. For Mum, she now had a baby she felt was completely hers, with no worries about Dad either. Apparently both Mum and Carol were calmer and more relaxed than she and I had been. So it was very different to when Mum was so anxious and had always felt that she had to share me with Auntie. When Carol was born, Mum gave me her own cherished doll. It had a china head and a soft body. Soon after I fell down the stairs with it. Mum heard me crying so loudly that she thought I must be badly hurt. But I wasn't really hurt. I was shocked and terribly upset because the doll's head was smashed in my fall. Mum, on the other hand, was quite relieved that it wasn't my head. When I was given a new doll, she was plastic with blonde nylon hair. Auntie used to crochet and made some lovely doll's clothes. One doll's dress was crocheted from what felt like silk. It was blue with frills around the skirt that were edged in a golden colour. For my 5th birthday, I had a second-hand doll's pram, a buggy. It was a smaller version of the big ones of that time. The middle section of the base that was for the mattress, lifted out, with underneath quite a big space for storage. We used to go for walks, Mum pushing Carol in her pram, while I pushed my doll's pram. The front of Carol's pram could drop down to make a sort of really big first pushchair or stroller. Somewhere around the time of Carol's birth, Dad brought home a little black smooth-haired terrier puppy, our dog Bess. Mum had not wanted a dog. However, the dog of a workmate of Dad's had died. He ordered another and in the meantime was given a puppy. So here came Bess, brought home in Dad's pocket, and guess what? Mum was too soft-hearted to turn her away, and she grew to really love her too. Bess and Fritz got along well. When we went away, Auntie and Uncle had Bess to stay with them. Mum and Dad did the same for them with Fritz when they went away. I soon came to enjoy living in Whiteley Crescent, which was the last road in Far Bletchley. Across the road from us on the Newton-Longville side was a clay embankment, where the Oxford to Bletchley railway line ran. This became the Bletchley to Cambridge line, via Bedford, in the other direction from Bletchley. The complete stretch was nicknamed the Oxbridge line. Beyond the railway line was the brick company knothole, the pit where a machine called a navvy dug out the brick clay, Oxford clay as it was known, the type found throughout the whole area. There was little other housing around, although they were building a small estate on the other side of the Newton Road. Until a parade of a few shops was opened there, our nearest shop was Chandler's, a small grocer on the way to Bletchley, on the Buckingham Road. The grocer had a little fridge freezer. After I started school, in the warmer weather I would sometimes beg a penny from Mum for dinner time. Then after school, we children would go into this shop and buy penny ice blocks. To make these, the grocer froze orange squash in ice trays, with a little wooden ice cream spoon in each compartment. They were a great treat to us. We did sometimes get an ice cream at home, when the ice cream van came round in the summer too. I made friends with Robert, who lived next door, in the first house on the corner of Newton Road. He was known as Wobbett, because he had a lisp. Sandra, who was a bit older than me and lived a few houses further down the crescent, was my best friend. She was rather short for her age, stocky, and spoke in a quite gruff voice. I didn't realise at the time, although I knew she often had to go to the hospital, that this was because she had a growth hormone deficiency. We all used to wander about and play together. Often we went down the crescent, across the very quiet road and under the railway bridge. Down a little lane was the Brick Company sports ground, surrounded and sheltered by high hedges. We sometimes played over there. But more often we scrambled up the clay bank to where we played and looked over the knothole and the navvy digging out the clay. Very little grew up there on the clay. There was some scrubby coarse grass and a few varieties of wildflowers, mainly low-growing ones such as bird's eye and lady's slipper. The former had very small, brilliant blue flowers. For some reason we knew lady's slipper as eggs and bacon. Maybe it was because some of the little yellow flowers had red streaks through them. Mum and Dad didn't know we went up on the clay banks. We all knew that we certainly wouldn't have been given permission to do that, as I have since been told by them too. Another play area was in the hollow centres of thick hedgerows across the Newton Road. This was a favourite in the evening, as parents could not find us when they called us in. We didn't leave it too long before going home though, as we didn't want to be in trouble. Other times we just played in the crescent or at one another's houses. Grandad had retired from his train driving, and I loved it when he came to visit, as did Carol when she was a bit older. "Grandad, have you got your reading glasses?" I am sure he helped me learn to read. I had a weekly comic, Tiny Tots. Later, Carol had the companion comic, Chick's Own. One method we used for learning to read was separating words into syllables, like that. I still have an old early reading book, the Blackie's Second Infant Reader. I don't know where it was published or when, but an imprint says the paper and binding conform to war economy standard. The paper is rather yellow in colour. For some years as a child, rather like Mum, I was quite sickly. Particularly in the winter months I had bouts of bronchitis, and until I had my tonsils out, tonsillitis. I remember Dr. Lovekin coming and my having to take penicillin medicine. Still pretty new then. I hated it. It was thick, pink and supposedly raspberry tasting. Ugh! I used to try to hide when I heard the doctor arrive. I also remember being in bed when I was ill and having picture and colouring books. One time when I was ill I sat in bed with the pastry board tilted on my knees, as I had been given a little plastic jointed Muffin the Mule, a children's TV puppet character, which would walk down a slope. When I had bronchitis I needed the air humidifying. We had one of the round Aladdin oil lamps for heating the bathroom. This stood on the floor and was 2 to 3 feet high. At least I suppose it was about that. There were some round ventilation holes in the top. To humidify the air, this was placed in my bedroom with a saucepan of boiling water on it. I remember Dad coming in during the night and taking the saucepan to top up with water. I would lie in bed looking at the ceiling, where the light shining through the holes made a pattern. With having the heater in there, the bedroom was also nice and warm. The bouts of bronchitis were something that lingered until I was about 10 years old. But I also frequently wet the bed for some years, I don't know why. It must have been difficult for Mum, especially with no modern washing machine, but I don't remember ever being scolded or punished, although I did feel ashamed of it. As with the bronchitis, I eventually just grew out of that too. I'd had most of the childhood illnesses by the time I was 10 years old, with there being no vaccinations against the common childhood diseases. I shall leave it there for now, because we are running out of time, and so I'll come back to it shortly.